pressing question to both of you. Do the two of you ever take a Big Mac yourself? And you may think it is a funny question, but that takes us to, yes, can we escape the private sector framing of our food environment? And it would be interesting to hear from the two of you. You are also consumers. You are key scientists. You are brilliant in your areas, but you're also a simple consumer. So my question is, Chris and Debisi, do you take a Big Mac by times? Or do you resist it so much that you really can resist that guilty pleasure?
Debisi, you want to start?
Well, okay, sure. Yes, I have had a Big Mac, but I'm not a big fan of burgers. I had probably a few when I was younger, when I was a kid. It's not my, I'm not a big fan of fast food. So, and
Okay.
not because of my academic grounding or anything. It's just my preference.
Well, Chris, you're French, so I can imagine that you really don't like Big Macs, or am I mistaken?
I think what is more interesting is the reason why you asked the question, which is, can we do food system transformation without involving the big actors? And I think that's really the big elephant in the room. And that's exactly what I was telling you earlier, that I was part of a conference here in Oxford on food system science. And that's one of the big hot questions. The place and the responsibility of the industry in not just the current situation, I think that is well established, but their potential role in transforming what we see currently as being unsustainable. And I think this is something where we don't have yet the answer. I think everybody has their position, and it's important to recognize that we don't necessarily have the same one. And that's part of the challenge, because I think nobody has currently the solution. Otherwise, we will already implement it. So I will leave it as it is. I appreciate, however, what Debisi has reminded us. In the first initial question, we talked about the private sector. And Debisi reminded us that private sector is from the small farmers who have barely enough to eat to the big transnational corporation. And I encourage everyone to actually stop using the term private sector, because it's misleading. It's putting in the same bag very, very different actors with very, very different capacity and capability. And we need to, when we talk about private sector, okay, who are you actually talking about? Because yes, some of the private sector would be part of the solution. Some of us, I would be slightly more cautious to bring them in, because we know from the past what they have been able to. But again, what is important is the conceptual rigor and clarity when we start talking about those issues.
Yeah, thank you very much, both of you. And I would like to add indeed the consumer perspectives. Are we just victims of the private sector pushing all kinds of food on us we never asked for? Or are we also powerful in terms of, in the end, we have to pay and we have to buy them? And if consumers also reject particular foods and particular items, then they can become a power in themselves. But not individually, I believe. That needs to become a power only if it is organized and operating in mass. But maybe let's go to Elizabeth. Elizabeth, did you see some interesting questions in our chat box?
Actually, not yet. I'm still waiting for people to post questions, but I do see remarks linked to the role of the private sector, and Ramson, for example, is saying that it needs to be regulated.
Yeah, I think both of you, and that both Chris and Debisi give room to the question of leadership and mediation, I would say. Then if transformation is not coming as a granted by itself, as a random process in the right direction, then who would you suggest has that legitimacy? I've seen that question, that legitimacy to mediate transformation in directions that society actually requests. Could you, Debisi, maybe start? Could you start? What is your opinion on?
Sure,
mediation?
I mean,
role.
Yeah. You know, unfortunately, we don't have the equivalent of an invisible hand optimizing food systems for the great and the good. But what we do have, for now anyway, is the food systems transformation pathways. Now, in 2021, countries set up multiple stakeholder dialogues.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's the most rich and robust compendium of the hopes and aspirations of nationals within countries across multiple sectors on how we transform. The question is, who's going to bite the bullet? There are sacrifices going to be made, and there will be pain points. So who helps to solve those pain points? Whether it's higher price, I ask people, do you want rich farmers or do you want cheap food? Because if you want the price of food to go up, that means, if you want farmers to be rich, price of food will go up. And, what does that do in society if you don't have social safety nets where people, have means of whether affording fresh produce, more nutritious food, etc. You don't want to push people out of accessing healthy, safe, nutritious food just because you want to increase income for the producers. So there are all these complexities I think we need to not grapple with, just settle with. And if we say, look, the price to pay for a healthier society is more expensive food, then so be it. What does it mean to have more expensive food? How do we ensure everybody can afford this? That's the next question. But that's like one of a million other things that will go into this process. Chris.
Yeah, Chris, what is your idea about the pathways as they are and the leadership that it requires to push them a bit in the right direction?
Well, I don't necessarily have very different view than a lot of other people. I think the pathway, as Debisi said, are maybe the expression of the willingness by the countries to start moving. The problem, as most of the 160 people online know, is the implementation. I think a lot of countries at the present time are struggling with, yeah, I know where I want to go, I don't know how to go there. And that's where maybe the responsibility of a community like us, and I mean, but like us, the more expert part can come into to help. But like any other change, as we try to convey the message during the presentation, we will stumble against blocks on the road, because not everyone in every country has an interest to see the changes. People are making a lot of money, as Debisi mentioned. Food. Is there something more frequent than you as a person buy than food? No. You have to eat 3 times a day. This is a huge money. If there is huge money, there is huge interest. If there is huge interest, there is huge status quo not to change it. So that's what we are against. And I think it was, again, Bart who reminded us, it's not just the big guys who are the problem. We as consumers are also a problem. Are you guys willing to drop everything that you are eating right now because it's unsustainable? Ooh, remember, tell me what you eat, I'm going to tell you who you are. Food is part of who we are, it's part of our culture, it's part of our norms and our culture. Changing culture, changing norms, changing society, it's painful. It's going to take time, it's going to take a lot of energy, a lot of resources, and that's what we're struggling at the present time. But at least the UNFSS process, as imperfect as it is, as I said, the first step toward the recognition that we cannot continue the way we do things right now.
But Chris, sorry. If food is more than just a commodity, why do we treat it like any other commodity? Why do we treat it like oil or gas or you name it, any raw material? Is it a raw material?
No, you said, why do you? I don't.
No, well, the world.
No, but again,
no, of course. If you look at the economics of food, it's not different from oil or gas.
Well, no, that is what I'm arguing. Is actually
we can make profit. We can even speculate with it.
Sure.
So
but the difference
that drives up the price. I'm referring to Debisi. It doesn't make only farmers rich. It makes all other value chain actors very, very rich.
But as I said,
what's your opinion on that? Is food just a commodity?
It's complicated, isn't it? I mean, food is you would say on the one hand, food is a basic human right, in theory. But in practice, it's commercially driven. It's not a commercial sector. It's not given for free. It's not produced for free. And also, it doesn't have a net positive impact on the environment. So it's this thing that we're producing to survive that has a net negative. At least the practice, the way we practice food production or our food production systems are leading to a net negative impact on the environment and on ourselves. So why don't we just why don't we do the right things? Why aren't we voting in our own interest? We say our food makes us unhealthy. It increases the cost of healthcare. It's increasing the production of greenhouse gases in the world. It's probably even one of the exacerbators of conflict in parts of the world. Exactly. Why aren't we making the right decision? So I think maybe I'll volley that question back to you. Why is it so complicated for us to vote in our own interest?
Yeah, well, to me, I think food is closer to a medicine than a raw material. But let's stop this conversation here. Maybe Elizabeth, have you seen any emerging questions?
More questions have been popping in, and I'm selecting. I think this is interesting. Do African governments have the global political power to transform their own food systems?
Was it the question?
And what is the question? Do they have?
Do African governments have the global political power to transform their own food system?
Debisi, you want to go first?
Come on, Chris. Sure. The short answer is yes. Yes, they do. No one should hide behind global trade, global value chains, because everyone's got decisions to make independently. I'll give you an example. When I was in government in Nigeria, a development finance institution wanted to lend to the Ministry of Agriculture. It was a huge grant component, and one of the requirements was for Nigeria to slow down its wheat transformation program. Why? Because it was impacting the importation of wheat from certain markets. So I'm keeping those countries anonymous. And the minister at the time said, "Don't be ridiculous. I mean, why would I give up my sovereignty, for short-term financing?" And so everyone has the wherewithal, and everyone should do the necessary hard work. Yes, it will be painful, but you've got to do the hard work. Case in point, when Russia and Ukraine, with the conflict of Russia and Ukraine, the grains, the fertilizer, and the seed from these countries significantly impacted a few African countries that had to then diversify their import markets. But one of the things the African Development Bank did was use that as an opportunity to increase domestic production in areas that could be competitive. Take wheat, in Ethiopia and Sudan. Wheat in Ethiopia and Sudan, I think those two countries, but for the conflict in Sudan now, Sudan would be a net exporter of wheat rather than net importer of wheat because of technical intervention. So you have the wherewithal and you have the power. Don't cede your power just because it's hypothetical. Chris.
Yeah, political will is the first step in a theory of change pathway. You need after capacity. And I think what most of the countries in Africa are lacking at the present time is not the political will, is the capacity to implement. They're not the only ones, but I think this is very severe in Africa. This is why I'm saying one of the barriers are obviously political economy, because some of the other actors have very strong interest not to see the system changing. But some of the other barriers are more institutional, is the capacity of the countries to implement the change that they would like to see. And that's often where most of the problem comes in. Because an institution, a country is made of people, and those people have either not the knowledge, not the ambition of necessary changing, even if the government would like to see. So it's the whole system that needs to change, and that's where it becomes challenging. It's not just one person.
Yeah, and let's not underestimate the political economy of business interests that indeed create lock-ins, for example, to keep on importing food where domestic production could be possible, and where the trade policies are influenced by lobbyists in favor of those importing companies, which are domestic companies in many cases. I can refer to Mozambique, which has an excellent opportunity of producing its own rice, but it's not happening. Same for Senegal, and many other examples are in front of us. Okay, Elizabeth, any more questions in our chat room?
Yes, there are more questions, but I wanted to highlight the comment of Asegit that says that he disagrees with this view because he thinks that there is a huge barrier in political will in most African countries, not just the technical know-how. But closing this, I go to another question, and that's more related to the power imbalance. And I'm combining two questions. So one is, what can we do to change the power imbalance to transform agri-food systems and make them equitable? And the second one, is there a way to take this agenda away from big powers and multinationals and hand it over to the local producers/consumers?
I think this is one of the key questions. What can we do? What can be done about imbalances in power?
Well, maybe the second question is the answer to the first. I think what can we do to address the power imbalance? First of all, who's the we? We as scientists can do something. We as policymakers can do something else. And both have our own responsibility and our own task. As scientists, it is our responsibility to document those power imbalance. We should team up with news media, because the news media is the most powerful, transmission belt to the rest of the population. So give your data to those, journalists. They are the ones who's gonna have a far bigger, echo chamber than you writing your little paper. As policymakers, you can challenge, you can point out those amongst your own institution, amongst your own ministry who drag their feet. So again, depending on who the we is, we all have a way to potentially address those power imbalance, and one of which is actually to redistribute that power to the other actors, which is the second question that was, passing the power to the smaller actors. That's my view.
Debisi, what is your opinion?
Yeah, I think I'd mentioned this before. Look, in 2021, we had the Food Systems Summit, and we had all these multi-stakeholder dialogues. I think that the more we deepen, and maybe the sad part for me was we stopped the dialogues, moved into the transformation pathways. We need to continue with those dialogues because things change. The world changes. People's opinions change. People's aspirations change. But also we need better systems as various stakeholders need better systems to exert influence on outcomes. Don't just cede it to some bureaucrat sitting in an office to sign a law or pass a declaration or develop a policy. You can exert external influence because ultimately everybody's affected by food. Bart, we eat it, we buy it, we grow it. So you are a stakeholder in this. Don't assume this is the purview of politicians or CEOs in a boardroom. You can exert influence. And so if we can just take it one step further beyond the food systems dialogues that happened in 2020, 2021, if we could create in countries, and I think there have been some of these in some countries anyway, there could be a mechanism that is constantly reviewing what the transformation pathways are and then holding government to account. Are you sticking to the plan? Are you sticking to the plan that we mandated you, to do for us? It's not about going to sit in Rome because there'll be the UNFSS +4, I think, in Addis. It's not about having a shiny document to present. It's what are you doing on the ground? What are the difficult decisions you're making, and how are you negotiating and navigating those trade-offs? Everybody should be involved, and everyone should be involved if you use that mechanism.
Exactly. And then we also have to be aware, if I walk through the streets of Cotonou or Nairobi, I also see another food system, which is not well described, not well understood by the pathway. It's very often very informal. People make their own realities. They govern their own streets. They govern their own system. And that, in a way, although it doesn't solve all the problems, it also gives me hope because people go their ways and they solve problems the way they think is wise, and sometimes provides opportunities and provides food to people, which could not be expected by just a system, food system analysis. It would not have been there. But then still, it is taking place and it is being shaped by every day's reality, by people taking responsibility beyond the pathways and the theories that we put on the table. And I think we have also a duty to understand and appreciate that reality, which is more than only the concepts and the theories and the policies that we are referring to. I think we are coming to the end of our module. Maybe Miriam, is there anything that we still need to highlight before we close?
Yes, please. Thank you very much, all four of you, Debisi, Bart, Chris, Elizabeth, for this very nice, lively discussion and a very positive ending that, you know, that we are all stakeholders and that we can exert our influence, and that at smaller scale changes are already happening. Thank you so much, everyone, for your contributions, for your presence, for your interest, and yeah, looking forward to see you around in the food systems land in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.